In this session, we are going to take a look of the poem Once Upon a Time by Gabriel Okara. Let us take a quick look at the background of the poem. Gabriel Okara was born in 1921 and he died recently in the year 2019. He was very interested in their catering, the culture and traditions. So as a Nigerian writer, he is very interested in its culture, service, even though it's kind of meeting and clashing sometimes with Western culture which is coming into Nigeria. Nigeria is a country in Africa and you can see it's indicated in the map. One of the things that concern about is that Nigerian people are losing their authentic Nigerian identity, their behavior because of the influence of Western culture. Nigeria was colonized by Great Britain in 1885 and it became a British protectorate in 1981 and it stayed under Form's colonial control up until 1960 when the country gained its independence, and now of course it is a trading partner. Nigeria exports a large number of products and it's also a very small producer of oil. So it still has the connections to the West, and this is kind of one of the concerns that we find in the poem. Okara worried about that development in the country is changing the culture and attitudes of the values and traditions of the Nigerian people, and he is worried that those changes and might be changing the fundamental nature of what it means to be Nigerian. Let us take a look at the poem itself. Once upon a time. Once upon a time, son, they used to laugh with their hearts and laugh with their eyes, but now they only laugh with their teeth, while their eyes, black gold eyes, search behind my shadow. There was a time indeed they used to shake hands with hearts, but that's gone, son. Now they shake hands without hearts, while their left hands search my empty pockets. Feel at home. Come again, they say. And when I come again and feel at home once, twice, there will be no thrice. For then I found door shut on me. So I have learnt many things, son. I have learnt to wear many faces like dresses. Home face, office face, street face, house face, cocktail face with all their conforming smiles like a fixed portrait smile. And I have learned too to laugh with only my teeth and shake hands without my heart. I have learned to say goodbye when I mean good riddance, to say glad to meet you without being glad, and to say it's been nice talking to you after being bored. But believe me, son, I want to be what I used to be when I was like you. I want to unlearn all these muting things. Most of all, I want to relearn how to laugh, for my laugh in the mirror shows only my teeth, like a snake's bare fangs. So, show me, son, how to laugh. Show me how I used to laugh and smile once upon a time when I was like you. Let us take a closer look at the poem in more detail. Well, the poem itself is written in second person and its structure a dramatic monologue. What is a dramatic monologue? A single person delivering a speech on one aspect of his life. The audience may or may not be present. Speaker reveals his temperament and character only through his speech. Talking to his son, so the reader is put in the position of the son. Who is listening to the father's talk? We never actually hear the son respond in any way. So the reader of the poem in the position of the son. It is very similar to the poem If by Rudyard Kipling, and If has similar structure and the same positioning of the reader as the child listening to the father's talk. The mood of the poem is very negative. It's got very somber and full of bitterness of the father talking bitterness towards the Europeans' bitterness. towards Nigerians who have changed their behavior and the kind of witness at the culture of Nigeria having changed with a general sense of regrets and caring trusted Europeans in the first place. The tone, unsurprisingly in the poem, very cautionary, advisory tone. It's still caring for the son, concern for him because the father doesn't want him to learn the behavior of the same westernized behavior that he is learned. He is hoping that the son might be able to change the things in the future. Let us take a closer look of the poem in more detail. The title of the poem and the effect opening line is a phrase taken from the convention of Western children's stories and a fairy tales. This idea of once upon a time, so it's quite ironic as an opening because the poem is all about Nigeria regaining its authentic true Nigerian identity, and yet the poem itself opens with a phrase which is more traditionally associated with the Western culture. So even the opening line and the title of the poem, we see that tension between the different culture. All the way through the poem, the speaker refers to the group of people with the pronoun they. They refers to Nigerian people who started to follow them or westernized behavior use of the word they. They is very personal and it kind of carries that sense of alienation and bitterness of the speaker. We sense that he feels very angry about what has happened. The poem also uses past tense to suggest this idea of looking back to the past, nostalgic tone, and hoping some ways can return to it to the case the father seems to think that the past was better than the present. This idea of the behavior of people now has changed at the friendliness and warmth used in the past is ended. People behavior now it's for more fake and insincere. We also see some interesting imagery in the poem. People laugh with their teeth is very hostile and aggressive and not sincere laughter. It is very fake, but also kind of how country monkeys show aggression by gritting their teeth and smiling. So it's every hostile, very angry kind of image. So westernized culture, how it changed people's behavior in Nigeria. One of the other images we see in the first stanza is the idea of ice, black gold eyes. I mean the image of the block of ice is very hard and cold and unfriendly. So it is a kind of goes back to the tone of the poem, the bitterness that the speaker feels about how people are now behaving. And of course the coldness in that image also suggests the kind of the hospitality and alienation that he feels in the relationship with other people. We also have the image of search behind my shadow. This idea that when he turns and leaves the people, they are watching him from behind his back. It is very sinister, very predatory, analyzing him as he talks away, staring at his shadow, and the verb search can create the sense of watching, and we were analyzing and probing him for weakness. It's very kind of aggressive image. Let us take a quick look at stanza 2. All the way through the poem, this idea of the almost in the same meaning, they are looking back to the past nostalgically, the sense that people in the past behaved in the more friendly way, and now of course they don't. That warmth, this kind of quackery has been exposed. Stanza 2 also kind of reinforces this kind of sad tone in the poem. If you have look at the end of the line, they asked to shake hands of their hearts. We see this, it's colon, and this introduces and emphasizes that clause that follows, but that gone son, and that line creates sadness. It is a nostalgia for the past, and in some ways sad tone because it can't come back its final again. Have continued use of imagery in this stanza, the idea that people shake hands without hearts, the image of the people unfriendliness, and this kind of goes back to the idea that The father in the poem feels that people's behavior now is insincere and fake. It lacks genuine sense of warmth that he was used to in the Nigeria of the past. Stanza 2 ends with a really interesting final couple of lines. We get this phrase, while their left hand search my pocket. And it's an interesting image because it suggests this idea that the final two lines and the stanza are really interesting. We have the image, while their left hand search my empty pockets, and this kind of sense that the father is talking to the Nigerian who became more westernized, and that is the father shake hands with his person. They are search my empty pockets with their left hand trying to steal from him. Search pockets. So we get this sense of the Nigerian having things stolen from them by the greedy westerners or by corrupt Nigerians who have westernized now. If we read these last couple of lines in a more symbolic sense, our mind able to argue that this idea of searching empty pocket really is an image of kind of westerners who have come into the country searching, when this case stealing from the people and going through their pockets. The pockets being a symbol of land and its resources. In that sense, the adjective empty might be a reference to the poverty of the Nigerian people themselves. So even though this group of westerners coming in are looking to exploit them, steal from them and take what they can, and again we get a sense of bitterness about the situation, but by using a really personal kind of intimate image of essential being mugged by the person, shaking hands make us feel much more personal, much more invasive and much more hostile. Let us have a look at stanza 3. Very interesting is that this stanza, feel at home, come again. So we have the father, right, old speaker in the poem, imitating the voice of the others, clearly making them being sarcastic and trying to draw out of the fact that what they say isn't true. It is not sincere. They say feel at home and come again, but they don't mean it. And of course, we get that here in the short line, when I come again and feel, we have this really short line and lots of enjoyment. And remember, this line in this sentence here suggests that kind longing for sincere emotion, come again and feel. This is the last word on that line is feel, that really emphasize this kind of desire to go back to an authentic Nigerian identity. There is emotional that feels it sincere and has all those things, and so we get again the sense of exasperation that father feels this desperate desire for people to be sincere and honest with each other. We have a use of rhyme at home, once, twice. There will be no thrice. So twice and thrice are rhyming words. Thrice means three, just 3 times. So it is being humorous, sarcastic at the same saying that once or twice has been visited those people. Third time he goes there, they pretended not to be in, or they don't let him into the home because when anything to do with it. So he is kind of bitter and angry at this kind of insincere behavior. We have the image of closed doors. The closed doors represent closer and finality in the relationship. It represents insincerity and fakery of the kind of the westernized people who invite him but really don't want to visit at all. But it should also be symbolic. This idea of those might represent opportunity. So door being such might represent the sense that Nigerian people are finding opportunities and have been closed to them because the westerners are coming into the country. Stanza 4. An interesting idea runs through the poem, learning as a repeated kind of theme. And here we have the father talking about things that he is learned to be insincere. He is learned to fake in his behavior towards others, and this comes across in the imagery in this particular stanza. We have the verb face as it clothing its superficial behavior change. If you look that he talks about for his behavior, father or as a young husband, the sense that these are the roles that we perform like an actor. We have office face at work, street face for how he behaves in public, house face for when he is having people around to his own home, and cocktail face for his behavior when he visits other people. But this whole thing is very bitter, very angry, this idea that these different faces are really his authentic identity. Aren't it? They are just versions of him. Performance is his put on when really deep down he just wants to be the one authentic person, his real self, and we get this conforming just means to kind of it, and in be belong, and wears this grin on his face, like looking like he is having a good time, just so you can fit in with everyone around him, and just to inform he feels angry and bitter and that no one seems to speak up, and so something about the changes in the culture around them, and that in the final image in this stanza, portrait, fixed portrait smile. Portrait is a kind of smile which is lacking warmth. We have all been there posing for a photograph, and that person taking picture is too long, and you are just standing there face, and the longer you hold it, more and more rigid, it becomes more fake, it became difficult. This idea of smiling here is really insincere, and this idea of people teeth is fake, smiling is fake, showing of happiness when really people are quite upset deep. Let us take a look at stanza 5. Use of the verb go into the theme of the learned that runs through the poem, because learn to be more like Westerns and of Western influence Nigerians, and feels better about having transformed. In that way, we have repeated lines kind of come back from earlier on. In the poem, this image of laughing teeth, shaking hands at your heart, we have seen this earlier in the poem. Some ways they are rephrased lines at most like a refrain. Refrain is simply a repeated line in a poem, and it just emphasizes that he is becoming more like the Westerners, and he is angry himself for becoming so insincere and fake, almost becoming a liar, and he is longing deep down to return to his authentic true behavior, because ultimately he wants to have that sense of integrity and feel good about himself again. Let us take a look at stanza 6. We have the nostalgic tone running through this first idea of longing to be authentic and true, but really what that means is returning to the Nigeria that the father remembers when he was young man. This longing return to the past, what I used to be before Nigeria became more westernized, before it changed its culture and traditions in its value. We can get this wonderful use of the word muting. Muting means silence of something. There is no such word as muting to knowledge. So we have a word being created here, and it's being used perhaps as a verb, perhaps as an adjective to describe this different behavior. Silence is authentic voice. That silence is ability to speak at the true Nigerian man as a kind of authentic identity. We get the use of contrasting the poem as well as how the father feels fake, insincere, and feels like he is changed. And we have the innocence of the son. We get this line, when I was like you. So the contrast there, and it's also create a change in tone, because there is a essence now for hope in the future. The idea that the children, the son, might represent a possibility of returning to the better past in future, that Nigeria might regain or retake its authentic culture again, and that comes in again, of course, in this idea of relearning, this idea of possibility of recreating something, relearning and returning to an authentic past. We have the imagery in the final line of snake bearing its fangs. This simile are so very hostile, that just that the father is angry at himself because he has been talking on this kind of Western culture, and in some ways it is made him really hostile as a person. This idea of bearing fangs is very aggressive, like image of, but of course snakes also carry with that kind of idea of poison and venom. So this kind of sense that it perhaps he has been poisoned by the Western influence and corrupted some way. Let us have a look at stanza 7. Okay, so the final stanza in the poem, and the first thing to note is short compared to the others, and that is because this final suggests really big swift tone. We have the repeat of the imperative, remember, imposters of those passive verbs. Shows me because the adult speaker of the father in the poem wants to relearn from the son how to become a better person. It is a really interesting reversal of that typical relationship. Rather than the adult being the teacher and the child being the learner, it is some other way around. So child can teach adult something about how to behave. We had this really interesting final couple of lines on some levels suggest this idea. Roll from nostalgia, I used to laugh and smile. He is referring back to the past. Again, this idea that Nigeria in the past and his own behavior in the past was somehow better than how it is in Nigeria today. He is hoping his son can some way help to reclaim the past and bring it back and take Nigeria back to how he remembers it being in the past. We have the use of the fairy tales phrase again, once upon a time, and it's an ambivalent because it suggests a couple of possible ways of reading it. In a positive interpretation would be the final line, once upon a time, is using that fairy tale phrase again, because the idea of innocence, this is idea that Nigeria can return the fun, can Nigeria regain Nigerian identity and make Nigeria better in the future. Let us have a quick recap. In the past, people used to laugh with their hearts and eyes showing real warmth. But today, people used to laugh with their teeth, their eyes lack the feeling of warmth. People have lost all the warmth in handshakes. People learn to say glad to meet you in dry formality. People wear multiple faces on all occasions, like changing dresses. People show mixed emotions in faces. Guests are welcomed at home once and twice. The door will shut if they visit thrice. The people want to unlearn the muted emotions and to relearn the innocent ways of smiling. Okay, what is a figure of speech? A figure of speech is a phrase or word having different meaning than its literal meaning. It conveys the meaning by identifying or comparing one thing to another. What is simile? It is a type of comparison between things or objects by using as or like. For an example, he sways his head from side to side with movements like a snake. This is from Megawitty. Like dresses, home face, office face, cocktail face. This is from Once Upon a Time. What is metaphor? Metaphor is comparing two unlike objects or things which may have common qualities. For an example, he who does not stoop is a king we adore. This line is from Everest is not the only peak. Save our deposed bodies to the ground. This line is from Holocron. Now let us have a look at alliteration and figure of speech in our poem. Alliteration. Now they shake hands without hearts. Cocktail face with all their conforming smiles shows only my teeth like snakes' bare fangs. In the first line, H is alliteration, and in the second line, C is alliteration, and in the third line, S is alliteration. Figure of speech in our poem is, while their eyes black gold eyes is metaphor, like dresses home face is simile, like a fixed portrait smile is simile, shows only my teeth like a snake's bare fangs is a simile. Appreciation questions. What do you associate it with title of the poem? The title of the poem is like a fairy tale. What is the relationship between the narrator and the listener, father and son? Who are they? They are the people of modern days. Explain. Laugh with their teeth. To fake a laugh without emotions. Explain. Eyes black cold eyes. Eyes lacking feeling of warmth. Identify the figure of speech. Metaphor. Explain. Left hand search my empty pockets, evaluating the narrator's worth and power. How is their handshake? Their handshake have become fake. What happens to the poet when he visits someone for the third time? The doors will shut if he visits thrice. Whom does I refer to? I refer to the poet. How does the poet compare his face? The poet compares his face to a portrait. Explain cocktail face. Find the figure of speech. Face shows mixed emotions is a simile. What does the poet want to relearn? How to laugh? The poet wants to show his real feelings. Whom does the poet want to relearn? The poet wants to relearn from his son. Find the figure of speech. There is a simile here. What does the poet long for? The poet longs for child-like innocence. Mention the qualities the child in the poem symbolizes: innocence and ignorance. And this is the end of the session. I think it is a great one for the use in the exam. As usual, if you find this video helpful, do your revision. Bye for now. Thank you.